Tonight, 5 dangerous horror stories from West Africa. What you are about to hear are first-hand testimonies collected from individuals across Nigeria, Ghana, Benin, and the Ivory Coast. Let us begin. Story 1. The Market Woman's Bargain. My name is Kayamaka. I'm 42 years old, and I run a fabric stall in Onitsha Market in southeastern Nigeria. I've been a trader for nearly 20 years, bought my shop with my own hands, my own sweat. I'm a practical woman. Numbers, inventory, haggling with suppliers. That's my world. I never had time for superstition. When the older women in the market whispered about avoiding certain areas after dark, about not accepting gifts from strangers, I'd smile politely and move on. I thought I was too smart for old wives' tales. Too modern. Too educated. I was wrong. Let me be clear, I don't believe in juju. Or at least, I didn't. I was raised Catholic. I went to university in Lagos. When people talked about spirits and witches, I'd nod respectfully, but inside I'd think it was just stories to explain bad luck or coincidence. I'm a see it to believe it kind of person. Anyway. This happened about 8 months ago, during the rainy season. It was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays are when the big distributors come through. The market was chaos like always. Thousands of voices bargaining, shouting, laughing. The air was thick with humidity, smelling of frying plantain from the food vendors, diesel from the generators, that particular dusty sweet smell that fabric has when it's been shipped in bundles. I'd had a terrible month. My supplier had raised prices. My landlord wanted to increase my stall rent. My daughter needed money for school fees. I was stressed, exhausted, calculating numbers in my head constantly, trying to figure out how to make everything work. It was around 4 in the afternoon when she appeared. I noticed her because she was standing completely still. In Onitsha Market, nobody stands still. Everyone is moving, pushing, carrying loads on their heads, pulling carts. But this woman stood in front of my stall, just watching me. She was elderly, maybe 70, dressed in a faded wrapper and headscarf. Nothing unusual about her appearance, but something about the way she looked at me made my skin prickle. Her eyes were too focused, too knowing. "You are troubled, daughter," she said. Her voice was soft, but somehow I heard it clearly despite all the market noise around us. I forced a smile. "We're all troubled, Mama. It's the economy." She tilted her head slightly. "Your troubles are deeper than money. I can see the weight on you, on your shoulders, on your heart." I felt my smile falter. How did this stranger know? I hadn't told anyone how close I was to losing everything, not even my husband. "I can help you," she said, reaching into a worn cloth bag. "A simple charm. For prosperity. For protection. You place it in your stall, and within 1 month, your fortunes will change." She pulled out a small bundle wrapped in red cloth, tied with black thread. It was maybe the size of my palm. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to refuse. I'd seen these con artists before, selling magic to desperate people. But I was so tired, so desperate, and something about her eyes. "How much?" I heard myself ask. She smiled. Her teeth were stained dark red, like she'd been chewing cola nut. "No money, daughter. Just a promise. When your prosperity comes, and it will come, you must return to this spot in exactly 30 days and give thanks. Bring a white chicken and pour libation. That is all." It seemed too easy. Suspiciously easy. "That's it. Just come back and say thank you. That is all," she repeated. "But you must not forget. Exactly 30 days. The debt must be paid." I should have walked away. I should have told her no. But I took that bundle from her hands. It was heavier than it looked, and cold despite the humid heat of the day. The woman vanished into the crowd before I could ask her name. I tucked the bundle into the back corner of my stall, behind the bolts of Ankara print. I didn't really believe it would do anything, but I didn't throw it away either. 3 days later, a woman came to my stall and bought 150,000 naira worth of fabric. Cash. No haggling. Just pulled out the money and paid. It was my biggest single sale in 5 years. The next week, my landlord told me he'd decided not to raise the rent. Orders started coming in. Phone calls from customers I'd never met, saying they'd been recommended to me. My neighbor's stall, which had been doing better than mine for years, suddenly went quiet while mine stayed busy from opening to closing. Within 2 weeks, I'd made more profit than I usually made in 3 months. I should have been happy, grateful, but instead, I felt a growing unease in my stomach, like I'd swallowed something that wouldn't digest. At night, I'd dream about the old woman's red-stained teeth, her knowing eyes. I'd wake up sweating, my heart pounding. The bundle in the corner of my stall seemed to pulse sometimes, when I wasn't looking directly at it. The air around it felt colder, but business was good, so I tried to ignore the feeling. 30 days came faster than I expected. I woke up that Thursday morning with a knot of dread in my chest. I'd forgotten to buy the white chicken, forgotten to prepare for the libation. No, that's a lie. I hadn't forgotten. I deliberately pushed it out of my mind. Part of me hoped that if I ignored it, nothing would happen. After all, it was just superstition, right? I went to the market like always. Set up my stall. The morning was busy, 3 good sales before noon. I kept telling myself everything was fine. Around 2 o'clock, the market suddenly went quiet. Not completely silent. That's impossible in Onitsha, but the noise seemed to muffle, like someone had thrown a blanket over everything. I looked up from my ledger and my blood went cold. The old woman was standing in front of my stall again, but she looked different. Her wrapper was the same, her headscarf was the same, but her face was wrong. The proportions were slightly off, like a mask that didn't quite fit. And her eyes were completely black. Not just the pupils. The entire eye, white and all, was black as oil. "You forgot," she said. Her voice was the same soft tone, but now it seemed to echo, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. I'm sorry, Mama," I stammered. "I meant to. I'll do it tomorrow, I promise." "A debt unpaid," she interrupted, "becomes a debt compounded. You accepted the gift. You enjoyed the prosperity, but you thought you could cheat the exchange." My hands were shaking. Other vendors around me continued their business, chatting, selling, completely oblivious. It was like the old woman and I were in a bubble, separate from the rest of the world. "I'll pay," I said desperately. "Please, I'll buy 10 chickens, 20, whatever you want." Her smile widened, showing those red-stained teeth. But now I could see they weren't stained, they were sharp. Too many of them. Rows of them, like a shark. "Oh, you'll pay, daughter. But the price has changed." She reached toward me with one hand, and I saw that her fingers were too long, the joints bending in too many places. I stumbled backward, knocking over a display of lace fabric. My scream caught in my throat. That's when Pastor Emeka from the church stall 3 rows over came running. He must have seen me fall. He's a big man, over 6 feet, and when he pushed through to my stall, shouting, "Wedding day happen," the old woman turned her black eyes on him. For 1 second, Pastor Emeka froze. His face went gray. Then he started praying, loud and fast, in that deep voice of his. "Blood of Jesus, blood of Jesus. I cover this place with the blood of Jesus." The old woman hissed, actually hissed, like a snake, and stepped backward. The market sounds rushed back in all at once, loud and overwhelming. I blinked, and she was gone. Not walked away, just gone. Pastor Emeka helped me sit down. My whole body was shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. He asked me what happened, and I told him everything. When I finished, he didn't laugh or tell me I was crazy. He just looked very serious and very sad. "You go find that bundle," he said quietly, "and we go burn it tonight. Properly, with prayer." We did exactly that. Behind the church, with 4 other prayer warriors, we burned that red cloth bundle. The smell that came from it, God, I still smell it sometimes. Like rotting meat and sulfur and something sweet underneath that made you want to vomit. The cloth didn't burn normally. It writhed in the flames like it was alive, and the smoke was thick and black and formed shapes. I swear I saw faces in it. The prayers went on for 3 hours. My throat was raw from reciting psalms, from saying amen over and over. When the bundle finally burned to ash, I felt something release from my chest, like a hand that had been squeezing my lungs finally let go. But the debt wasn't fully paid, not in the way I'd hoped. My business didn't collapse, but it went back to normal. Steady, not spectacular. That's fine. I'm grateful for steady now. But other things changed. I can't sleep with the lights off anymore. Sometimes, in the corner of my vision, I see a shadow that's too tall, too thin. It never moves when I look directly at it, but I feel it watching me. My daughter, the one whose school fees started all this, she's been having nightmares. She wakes up crying, saying there's an old woman standing at the foot of her bed, asking when we're going to finish paying what we owe. Pastor Emeka says we broke the charm, but curses have roots. They dig deep. He says we have to keep praying, keep vigilant. Some debts, he told me, take years to fully clear. I don't accept gifts from strangers anymore. I don't make bargains, no matter how desperate I am. And when the older women in the market talk about avoiding certain things, about respecting the old ways even if you don't fully believe, I listen now, because I learned the hard way that belief doesn't matter. These things exist whether you believe in them or not, and they always collect their debts. Kayamika still runs her fabric stall in Onitsha Market. She asked us to share her story as a warning. Desperation makes us vulnerable, and there are forces that feed on that vulnerability. In West Africa, the concept of spiritual debt is not metaphorical. It is tangible, binding, and the interest compounds in ways that can span generations. Her daughter still has the nightmares. The shadow still watches. Some bargains can be broken, but the breaking leaves scars. Story 2. The Thing in the Lagoon. My name is Femi. I'm 36 years old, and I work as a marine biologist at the Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research in Lagos. I have a master's degree from the University of Port Harcourt. I've spent 15 years studying the coastal ecosystems of the Bight of Benin. I can identify over 200 species of fish by sight alone. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand. I know what belongs in these waters. I know what's natural and what isn't. What I saw in the Lagos Lagoon was neither. I'm a scientist. I deal in data, in peer-reviewed research, in observable, measurable phenomena. When fishermen would come to our institute with stories about strange things in the water, creatures that weren't fish or dolphin or manatee, I'd listen politely and then explain what they'd probably actually seen. Misidentified species, tricks of light on water, the brain filling in gaps with imagination. I was kind about it, but inside, I was dismissive. I thought I knew better. I don't anymore. This happened 4 months ago, in late September. We'd received reports from multiple fishing communities around Makoko and Alash about unusual disturbances in the lagoon. Nets being torn from the bottom up, not the top. Fish disappearing from already caught hauls while boats were still on the water. And one report of a thing that had surfaced near a canoe at dawn, causing 2 fishermen to abandon their boat and swim to shore in terror. My supervisor asked me to investigate. Standard protocol, probably just a bull shark that had wandered in from the Atlantic, or maybe a grouper bigger than usual. I took a small research boat, our underwater camera equipment, and my assistant, a young guy named Tun fresh out of university. We launched from the Institute's dock at 6 in the morning. The lagoon was calm, the water that particular brown-gray color it gets from all the sediment and urban runoff. The sun was just starting to burn off the morning mist. The air smelled like salt and diesel and rotting vegetation, normal Lagos lagoon smell. We headed toward the coordinates where the fishermen had reported the most recent sighting. It was a relatively shallow area, maybe 4 to 5 meters deep, near one of the smaller islands in the lagoon system. You really think it's just a shark? Tunda asked as we motored out. He was from the Delta region, grew up around water, but he looked nervous. Probably, I said, or a big catfish. You know how stories get exaggerated. He didn't look convinced. My grandmother is from Makoko. She says there are things in this lagoon that have been here longer than Lagos itself. Things that don't like being disturbed. I smiled. Your grandmother probably also says don't whistle at night or you'll call spirits. She does, Tun said quietly. And I don't whistle at night. We reached the location around 7:30. I killed the engine and we drifted, the boat rocking gently on the small waves. The sounds of the city, traffic, construction, the general chaos of Lagos seemed muted out here, swallowed by the expanse of water. I started setting up the underwater camera rig while Tund prepared the sampling equipment. That's when I noticed the silence. No birds. The lagoon normally has egrets, herons, gulls everywhere. That morning, there wasn't a single bird in sight. The water was completely still. No fish jumping, no ripples except from our boat. It's too quiet, Tund muttered. He was gripping the side of the boat, his knuckles pale. Probably just the tide, I said, but I felt it too. That animal instinct that every human has buried under layers of civilization. The one that says, something is wrong here. I lowered the camera into the water. The visibility was terrible, as expected, maybe 1 meter at best. The camera feed on my monitor showed murky brown water, some scattered debris, a plastic bag drifting past. Then the camera jerked. Hard. What was that? Tund asked. Probably snagged on something, I said, but my hand was already reaching for the winch to pull it up. The line went taut. Then it started moving, not drifting with current, moving deliberately, pulling the camera deeper. We're in 5 meters of water, I said, checking the depth gauge. The camera should be almost on the bottom. The line kept playing out. 6 meters. 7. 8. That's not possible, Tund whispered. We measured this area. It's not that deep. 9 meters. 10. Then the line went slack. I started cranking the winch to retrieve the camera. The motor whined as it pulled. When the camera broke the surface, Tund made a sound I'd never heard from a human throat before, something between a gasp and a whimper. The camera housing was crushed. Not cracked, crushed like something had squeezed it in a vise. The metal casing was bent inward, the glass lens shattered. But that's not what made my blood turn to ice. There were marks on the housing. Impressions, like fingers, but they were wrong. Too long, too many joints. And in the spaces between the finger marks, there were small circular depressions, perfectly round, each about the size of a 5 naira coin. Suction marks. We're leaving, Tund said, already moving toward the engine. Now? We're leaving now. I should have listened to him. But I'm a scientist. I needed to understand. I picked up the crushed camera housing to examine it more closely. That's when the boat lurched. Something had hit us from below. The impact lifted the entire stern out of the water for a second. Tund fell, cracking his head against the gunnel. I grabbed the rail to keep from going overboard. The water next to the boat began to churn. And then it surfaced. I need you to understand, I've seen a lot of marine life. I've seen whale sharks, manta rays, giant groupers. I've seen deformed fish, diseased fish, fish with mutations from pollution. This was none of those things. It broke the surface about 3 meters from our boat, and the first thing I registered was the size. It was massive, at least 5 meters long, maybe more. The body was serpentine but thick, muscular, covered in scales that were dark green-black and reflected the light like oil on water. But it wasn't a snake. It wasn't an eel. It had limbs. 4 of them, positioned along its body like a crocodile's, but the proportions were all wrong. Too long, too thin, jointed in too many places. The front limbs ended in hands. I can't call them anything else, with 7 or 8 fingers each, all different lengths, all tipped with curved black claws. And those suction cups, hundreds of them, running down the inside of each limb, pulsing, opening and closing like mouths. The head rose last, and that's when my mind started trying to shut down, trying to reject what I was seeing. It was almost humanoid in structure, a skull shape I recognized from anatomy, but elongated, the snout pushed forward like a crocodile's. But the eyes, God, the eyes were positioned forward, predator's eyes, with vertical pupils that contracted when they focused on me. They were yellow, the color of old brass, and they were intelligent. Not animal intelligence. Something else. Something that understood what it was looking at. The mouth opened, and I saw rows of teeth. Not shark teeth, not crocodile teeth. These were curved backward, thin as needles, hundreds of them in overlapping rows. Made for gripping, for holding prey that tried to escape. Behind the head, running down its neck, were gill slits. They flexed open and closed, even though it was above water. I could see the red tissue inside, pulsing. It looked at me, directly at me, and I swear on everything I hold sacred, it recognized that I was looking back. There was a moment, maybe 2 seconds, maybe less, where we were simply observing each other. Predator and prey, deciding. Then it opened its mouth wider, and a sound came out that I still hear in my nightmares. It was a clicking, rapid-fire clicking, like sonar, like echolocation. But underneath it was something else, a low vibration that I felt in my chest, in my bones. The sound made my teeth ache, made my vision blur. And beneath that, impossibly, I heard words. Not in my ears, in my head. In Yoruba. Surface walker. You don't belong here. I want to be clear, I don't speak Yoruba fluently. I know basic greetings, some common phrases, but I'm Igbo. Yoruba isn't my language. But I understood these words perfectly, completely, as if they'd been planted directly into my brain. Tund was screaming. He'd gotten the engine started, but his hands were shaking so badly, he kept flooding it. The engine coughed, sputtered, died. The thing in the water submerged, smooth as silk, barely making a ripple. For 10 seconds, nothing. Just Tund's panicked breathing, the slap of water against the hull, my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. Where is it? Tund whispered. Where did it? The boat lurched again, harder this time. Something was underneath us, circling. I could feel it through the fiberglass hull, a vibration, a presence, the displacement of water by something massive moving beneath us. Then I saw it, through the murky water. A shadow, darker than the surrounding brown. It was directly under the boat, and it was rising. Hold on, I shouted. The creature surfaced on the port side, its body scraping along the hull with a sound like nails on slate. One of those impossible limbs reached up, slowly, deliberately, and gripped the gunnel. The suction cups attached with a wet, meaty sound. The boat tilted toward it, water sloshing over the side. I could see the limb up close now. The scales were rough, almost chitinous, with patterns that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. The suction cups were ringed with tiny teeth, like lamprey mouths. The claws dug into the fiberglass, puncturing it easily. Another limb came up, gripping the other side. The boat was tilting further, water pouring in now. We were going to capsize. That's when Tund did something I'll never forget. He grabbed our sample case, a heavy metal box full of equipment, and swung it at the nearest limb with all his strength. The impact made a sound like hitting a drum. The creature recoiled, the limb releasing its grip. The clicking sound became a shriek, high-pitched, furious, like metal scraping metal. Go, Tund screamed. Start the engine. My hands moved on autopilot. I yanked the pull start 3 times. The engine coughed, caught, roared to life. I slammed the throttle forward. The boat lurched ahead, the sudden acceleration throwing both of us backward. I heard a tearing sound, the creature's claws ripping through fiberglass as we pulled away. I looked back. It was following us, not swimming, moving through the water with a sinuous, undulating motion, its limbs pulling it forward with impossible speed. It was faster than our boat, even at full throttle. The water churned white in its wake. It's gaining, Tund shouted. He was right. It was maybe 10 meters behind us and closing. I could see its head above water, those yellow eyes locked on us, unblinking. We were still 3 kilometers from the nearest dock. I don't know why I did what I did next. Instinct, maybe. Desperation. I remembered what my grandmother used to say about water spirits, that they have territories, boundaries they don't cross. I yanked the wheel hard to starboard, heading for the main channel where the big commercial vessels pass, where the water gets churned up by propellers, where the pollution is thickest, where it's too busy and too loud, where humans dominate. The creature followed us into the channel. We passed a container ship heading out to sea, its massive hull creating walls of wake. Our little boat bounced violently over the waves. I looked back, expecting to see the creature still behind us. It had stopped. It was treading water at the edge of the main channel, its head above the surface, watching us. We were maybe 50 meters away now, pulling further ahead with each second. It made that clicking sound again, but this time it was different. Slower, almost thoughtful. Then it spoke again, that voice in my head. The lagoon remembers when this was all ours. We remember, and we are patient. It sank beneath the water and was gone. We didn't stop until we reached the Institute's dock. Tun jumped off the boat before I'd even tied up and ran straight to the bathroom. I heard him vomiting. My supervisor came out, saw the damage to the boat, the claw marks, the crushed railing, the holes in the hull, and his face went pale. "What happened?" he asked. I opened my mouth to tell him, to explain, but what came out was, we hit a submerged container. In the channel, we should file a hazard report. He looked at me for a long moment. He's a Lagos man, born and raised. He grew up hearing the same stories I dismissed. "Yes," he finally said, "a submerged container. That makes sense. You should both go home. Take a few days." I wrote a report that said exactly that: collision with submerged debris. No mention of what we actually saw. Tun quit 2 weeks later. He moved back to the Delta, told me he was going to work in his father's business. Anything but water research. I'm still at the Institute, but I don't do field work anymore. I analyze data, write papers, supervise students. I tell myself I'm being cautious, responsible. But the truth is, I'm afraid. I've started researching the folklore, the stories I used to dismiss. In Yoruba tradition, there's a spirit called Un, goddess of rivers and waters. But there are others, older things that lived in the waterways before the cities, before the people. Things that aren't gods or spirits, but something else entirely. Things that remember when Lagos was just a fishing village, when the lagoon was wild and untouched. The old fishermen know, the ones who've been on the water for 40, 50 years. When I started asking subtle questions, they'd get quiet. One old man finally pulled me aside and said, "Some things, we share the water with them. We respect them, we leave them offerings, we don't go to certain places at certain times. That's how we survive." I asked him what happens if you don't respect them. He looked at me like I was stupid. "Then they remind you who the water belongs to." I've had the nightmares ever since. Dreams where I'm in the water, sinking, and I feel those limbs wrapping around me. Those suction cups attaching to my skin, pulling me deeper. I wake up gasping, checking my body for marks. Last week, my daughter asked me to take her fishing. She's 7, loves the water, always begging me to teach her about marine life. I told her maybe next year. She cried, said I never want to do anything fun anymore. She's right. But how do I explain to her that some things in the water aren't fish? That some things are older than our cities, our civilizations, our understanding of what's possible? How do I tell her that her father saw something that proved we're not the dominant species we think we are? I still work with water, but I don't trust it anymore. Every time I see the lagoon, I wonder what's beneath the surface. What's watching? What's waiting? And whether it's decided it's time to remind us again. Dr. Femi still works at the Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research. He still hasn't told anyone the full truth of what happened that morning. The official report lists it as a collision with debris. The destroyed camera equipment was written off as equipment failure. But the fishermen around Makoko and Alash, they know. They've always known. They leave offerings now at the spot where the encounter happened. Small things, coins, cola nuts, bottles of gin poured into the water. A sign of respect, a reminder of the agreement. In West Africa's waterways, there are ecosystems that science has documented, And then there are ecosystems that predate documentation, predate science itself. Some things aren't meant to be studied or understood. They're meant to be acknowledged, respected, and avoided. The Lagos Lagoon is 6,354 square kilometers of water. We've mapped perhaps 40% of it thoroughly. What lives in the other 60% doesn't particularly care about our maps. Story 3. The Midnight Knock. My name is Alma. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a nurse at Ridge Hospital in Accra, Ghana. I do night shifts in the emergency ward, 3 nights a week, 12 hours each. I'm good at my job. I'm calm in emergencies. I don't panic when things go wrong, and I've seen enough trauma and death that I thought nothing could rattle me anymore. I was wrong. I'm not a superstitious person. Can't afford to be in my line of work. When patients come in wearing talismans or amulets, when families insist that their loved one is cursed or bewitched, I smile and nod, but I focus on the medical reality. Blood pressure, heart rate, symptoms I can measure and treat. My mother is a traditional priestess in our village near Kumasi. Growing up, I watched her perform rituals, make offerings, enter trances. I respected it as part of our culture, our heritage, but I never believed it was real. I thought it was psychology, the power of belief, the placebo effect dressed up in ceremony. I left the village for Accra as soon as I could, got my nursing degree, built a life in the city where things made sense, where everything had a rational explanation. I haven't been back to the village in 3 years. Maybe that was my mistake. This happened 6 weeks ago on a Tuesday night. It was the rainy season, and the storm that evening was brutal, the kind of rain that turns across streets into rivers, where the thunder is so loud it sets off car alarms. The hospital was relatively quiet, though. Most people don't go out in weather like that unless it's an emergency. I was working with 2 other nurses, Kwame and Efua, and one doctor on call who was sleeping in the staff room. Around midnight, we'd had a brief rush, a motorcycle accident, a child with fever, an old man with chest pains. By 1 a.m., things had calmed down. The wards were full, but everyone was stable. I was at the nurse's station, updating charts, when the lights flickered. Not unusual during a storm. Our generators would kick in if we lost power. But something about the flicker made me look up. The emergency room felt different. Colder, somehow, even though the AC was set to the same temperature it always was. The fluorescent lights seemed dimmer, casting longer shadows. "You feel that?" Efua asked quietly. She was standing by the medicine cabinet, her hand frozen on the handle. "Feel what?" Kwame asked, but his voice was uncertain. "Like we're being watched," Efua whispered. Before I could respond, we heard it. A knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the emergency room entrance. The thing about that knock was this. The emergency room entrance is automatic doors. Glass doors that slide open when someone approaches. You don't knock on automatic doors. Kwame walked over to look. The doors were closed, and through the rain-streaked glass, we could see nothing. No one was there. "Probably someone left," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. He came back to the nurse's station. We all went back to work, but the atmosphere had changed. That feeling of being watched intensified. I found myself glancing over my shoulder, checking the corners of the room. 10 minutes later, the knock came again. 3 times. Slow, deliberate, the exact same rhythm. This time, I went to check. I walked to the doors, and they slid open automatically, revealing the covered walkway outside. Rain was pouring down, creating a curtain of water just beyond the overhang. The parking lot lights made the rain look like static on an old television. There was no one there, but there were wet footprints on the concrete. Bare footprints, small like a child's, leading up to the door and then stopping. Not turning around, not walking away, just stopping, as if whoever made them had vanished into thin air. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. "Alma," Efua called from inside. "What is it?" "Nothing," I said, stepping back. The door slid shut. Just the rain. But as I walked back to the nurse's station, I heard something that made my blood freeze. From the hallway that led to the patient wards, I heard a child's voice singing. It was faint, barely audible over the storm, but unmistakable. A traditional Akan song, the kind children sing while playing clapping games. But the tune was slow, distorted, like a recording played at the wrong speed. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Kwame and Efua both nodded, their faces pale. "It's coming from the children's ward," Efua said. The children's ward was at the end of a long hallway. We had 3 children admitted that night, 2 with malaria, 1 recovering from surgery. All of them should have been sleeping. We walked down the hallway together, none of us willing to go alone. The singing got louder as we approached. It was definitely a child's voice, but there was something wrong with it. Something hollow, like it was echoing from far away. The lights in the hallway flickered again. When we reached the children's ward, Efua pushed the door open slowly. All 3 children were asleep in their beds. The monitors beeped steadily. Everything looked normal, but the singing continued. It was coming from the corner of the room, by the window. The curtains were drawn, and in the gap between them and the wall, I could see a shadow. A small shadow, child-sized. "Who's there?" Kwame called out, his voice cracking slightly. The singing stopped. For 5 seconds, there was only the sound of rain against the window and the beeping of monitors. Then the shadow moved. It stepped out from behind the curtain, and I understood why the singing had sounded wrong. It was a child. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, wearing a white dress that was soaking wet. Her hair was plastered to her head, water dripping onto the floor. But her feet weren't touching the ground. She hovered maybe 2 inches above the tile floor, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Her head was tilted at an angle that was too far, too wrong. And when she raised her face to look at us, I saw that her eyes were completely white. No pupils, no iris, just white. She smiled. Her teeth were too many, too small, like baby teeth that had never fallen out, crammed into a mouth too small to hold them all. "Hello, Sister Alma," she said in that same hollow, echoing voice. "I've been waiting for you," Efua screamed. Kwame grabbed my arm, pulling me backward, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, staring at this impossible thing in front of me. "Your mother sent me," the child thing said, tilting its head the other way, bones cracking audibly. "She says you've forgotten. Forgotten your promises. Forgotten where you come from. My mother." My blood turned to ice. "She says the debt still stands. Blood debt. 3 generations worth. You can run to your city, Sister Alma, but you can't hide from what you owe." "I don't owe anything," I heard myself say, my voice barely a whisper. The thing's smile widened impossibly, the corners of its mouth reaching almost to its ears. "Your grandmother made a bargain. Power for her children, protection for her family. But the price must be paid. Every generation, one must serve. Your mother served. Now it's your turn." I remembered then, suddenly, with perfect clarity, a conversation I'd overheard when I was 12 years old. My mother arguing with my grandmother, crying, saying, "I won't let them take Alma. I won't let her become what I became." I'd thought they were arguing about my education, about me leaving the village. But now, "If you refuse," the child thing said, "the protection ends. For all of you. Your mother, your sisters, your brother's children. Do you understand, Sister Alma?" Behind me, Kwame was praying in Chui, words tumbling out in a desperate stream. Efua had collapsed against the doorframe, her eyes wide with shock. The 3 sleeping children in the beds began to stir. All of them, simultaneously, their eyes still closed, started singing the same song the thing had been singing. "You have until the new moon," the child thing said. Its voice was fading now, becoming fainter, more distant. "Come home, Sister Alma. Come home and accept what you are. Or watch everyone you love suffer for your pride." The lights went out completely. In the darkness, I heard that hollow singing, multiplying, coming from everywhere and nowhere. The emergency backup lights flickered on, bathing everything in red. The child thing was gone. The 3 children in the beds were awake now, all of them sitting up, all of them staring at me with normal, frightened eyes. "Why were we singing?" the oldest one asked, her voice small and confused. "I don't remember. Why am I wet?" I looked down. All 3 children were soaking wet, their hospital gowns dripping, their hair plastered to their heads. Water was pooling on the floor around their beds, but their windows were closed. There was no water anywhere else in the room. I don't remember much of the next hour. Kwame says I went into autopsy mode. That's what we call it when nurses shut down emotionally and just focus on tasks. I changed the children's gowns, checked their vitals, called for the doctor. All 3 kids were fine physically, but they had no memory of singing or getting wet. The doctor examined them, found nothing wrong, attributed it to sleepwalking, though he couldn't explain the water. We didn't tell him what we'd seen. What would we say? That a ghost child delivered a message about blood debts? He would have sent us to psychiatric evaluation. But we all saw it. Kwame, Efua, and me. We saw the same thing. When my shift ended at 6 a.m., I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, shaking too hard to drive. The rain had stopped. The sun was coming up, turning the sky pink and gold. Normal morning. Normal city sounds. Traffic starting. Vendors setting up. Call to prayer from the nearby mosque. Everything looked normal, but I knew it wasn't. Nothing would be normal again. I called my mother for the first time in 8 months. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. "Amma," she said quietly. Just my name. But the way she said it, relieved, sad, resigned, told me everything. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice cracked. She was silent for a long moment. "Then, I tried to protect you. I thought if you left, if you built a different life, maybe they would forget. Maybe the debt would pass you by. But it didn't." "No," she whispered. "Blood debts don't forget, my daughter. Your grandmother. She was desperate. Her first 3 children died before their second birthdays. Fever, accidents, things that made no sense. She went to the old priest, the one who deals with the spirits from the deep forest. He offered her a bargain, power to protect her bloodline. But someone from each generation must serve as a bridge, a vessel. Serve what? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. The spirits between worlds. The ones who walk in dreams, who collect debts, who maintain the balance. It's not evil, Amma. It's not good either. It just is." And your grandmother agreed because she was a mother who couldn't bear to lose another child. I closed my eyes. "And you've been serving them? All these years?" "Yes. Every new moon, I enter the trance. I let them use me to deliver messages, to settle accounts, to cross between worlds. It's why I never left the village. Why I couldn't. I'm not like you," I said desperately. "I don't believe in." "Belief doesn't matter," my mother interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "You saw it tonight. You know it's real now. The question is, will you accept it, or will you let everyone you love pay the price for your refusal?" I thought about my younger sisters, about my brother's 2-year-old twins, about my mother, growing older, growing tired. What happens if I refuse? She was quiet for so long I thought the connection had dropped. Then, the protection ends. For all of us. And the things that killed your grandmother's first children, they're still out there, Amma. Still hungry. The bargain keeps them away. Without it, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. "I need time," I said. "You have until the new moon. 10 days. After that, the decision will be made for you." She hung up. I went home, took a shower, couldn't get warm no matter how hot I ran the water. I looked at myself in the mirror. Same face, same body, same person I'd always been. But something had shifted. Some fundamental understanding of the world had cracked open, and I couldn't close it again. That was 6 weeks ago. I went back to the village 2 days before the new moon. I told myself I just wanted to talk to my mother, to understand better. But I knew the truth. I'd already made my decision the moment that thing in the hospital said my family would suffer. The ceremony happened on the new moon. I won't describe all of it. Some things are sacred, and some things are too terrifying to put into words. But I'll tell you this. When you let something ancient use your body as a doorway, you understand how small you are, how young humanity is, how many things existed before us and will exist after us. I serve now. Once a month, I return to the village. I let the spirits use me to deliver their messages, to settle their accounts. I remember some of it, forget most of it. Wake up exhausted, with marks on my skin that fade by morning. I still work at the hospital. I'm still a good nurse. But I'm different now. I can see things others can't. Sometimes, in the emergency room, I see shadows around certain patients. Shadows that tell me they won't survive the night, no matter what we do. I see spirits waiting in corners, patient and eternal. And once a month, I see that child thing. It comes to the hospital on the new moon, stands in the hallway, and watches me work, making sure I remember my promise, making sure I don't run. My coworkers think I've become more spiritual. They've noticed I wear traditional beads now, that I won't work on new moon nights anymore. Efua and Kwame don't ask questions. They know, and they're careful around me now, like they can sense the change. I'm not afraid anymore. That's the strangest part. I thought I would be terrified, angry, resentful, but there's a strange peace in acceptance, in understanding your place in something older and larger than yourself. My mother says it gets easier, says eventually you stop fighting it and start understanding the purpose, the balance. I don't know if I believe her yet, but I show up every new moon. Because the alternative, watching my nieces and nephews die inexplicable deaths, watching my mother waste away without the protection, is not something I can live with. Some debts are inherited. Some bargains echo through generations. And sometimes, the only choice you have is whether to accept it with grace or fight it with futility. I chose grace, but I still lock my doors at night. Still check the shadows in my apartment. Still wake up sometimes with the taste of rainwater in my mouth and the echo of hollow singing in my ears. The debt is being paid, but the cost is higher than I ever imagined. Sister Alma still works at Ridge Hospital in Accra. She still saves lives every night she's on shift. But once a month, when the moon goes dark, she serves a different purpose. She has become what her mother was, what her grandmother bargained for, a bridge between worlds. In a Kan tradition, there are debts that transcend the individual. Family debts, blood debts, spiritual obligations that bind generations. The concept seems foreign to modern sensibilities, unfair even. But fairness is a human construct. The old powers don't deal in fairness. They deal in balance, in exchange, in the eternal mathematics of give and take. Alma's story is a reminder that sometimes our ancestors' choices become our inheritance. And sometimes, the only way forward is through acceptance. The new moon comes every 29 days. Regular as clockwork, inevitable as death. And Sister Alma will be there, ready to serve. Story 4. The Forest That Hunts. My name is Malik. I'm 41 years old, and I work as a wildlife photographer. I've spent the last 20 years documenting endangered species across West and Central Africa. Gorillas in Cameroon, elephants in Gabon, chimps in Ivory Coast. National Geographic has published my work. The BBC has licensed my footage. I've won awards. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand. I know the forest. I know how to move through it, how to read it, how to survive in it. I've spent months at a time in the deepest parts of the Congo Basin, places where no roads go, where the canopy is so thick you can't see the sky. I thought I knew what the forest was capable of. I was catastrophically wrong. I'm not a superstitious man. I'm a pragmatist. When local guides would refuse to enter certain areas, telling me about cursed groves or sacred spaces where spirits dwell, I'd respect their beliefs, but continue anyway with a different guide. When villagers warned me about forests that eat people, I'd nod politely and chalk it up to missing persons who'd simply gotten lost. I've encountered every dangerous animal in West Africa. I've been charged by forest elephants, treed by leopards, had close calls with hippos and crocodiles. I respect nature's dangers, but I understand them. They're biological, predictable, survivable if you know what you're doing. What happened to me in the forest outside of Bumi, Benin, wasn't biological, wasn't predictable, and I'm not entirely sure how I survived. This happened 3 months ago. I'd been commissioned to photograph the remaining sacred forests of Benin, small patches of ancient woodland that local communities have protected for generations, believing them to be homes of Vodun spirits and ancestors. Most are only a few hectares, surrounded by farmland and villages. The forest I entered that day was called Cass Forest. About 800 hectares of old-growth tropical forest, never logged, never cleared. The village chief had given me permission to enter, but only during daylight hours. He was very specific about that. "You must leave before the sun touches the trees from the side," he said, using his hands to show the late afternoon angle. "When shadows grow long, the forest changes. It becomes something else." I thanked him for his concern and assured him I'd be careful. In my mind, I was thinking, superstition, traditional beliefs, nothing to worry about. I'd been in hundreds of forests. This would be no different. I entered around 9 in the morning, carrying my camera equipment, water, GPS, satellite phone, everything I needed for a day's shoot. The entrance was marked by a small shrine, offerings of kola nuts and gin bottles arranged around carved wooden figures. The moment I stepped past the shrine, the temperature dropped. Not dramatically, but noticeably. The forest was darker than I expected, the canopy thick with vines and epiphytes. The air smelled of rich soil, rotting vegetation, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Something almost sweet, like incense. It was beautiful. Shafts of sunlight breaking through the canopy in golden columns. Enormous buttressed trees that had to be hundreds of years old. The calls of birds I didn't recognize echoing through the understory. I started photographing, working my way deeper into the forest, following animal trails, looking for good compositions. I should have been paying attention to the time. I'd been shooting for maybe 5 hours when I noticed the silence. In a healthy tropical forest, there's always sound. Birds calling, insects buzzing, monkeys crashing through branches, the wind moving leaves. It's never truly quiet. But suddenly, I realized I couldn't hear anything except my own breathing and footsteps. The forest had gone completely silent. I stopped walking and checked my watch. 4:30 in the afternoon. The light was getting golden, slanting through the trees at that low angle the chief had warned about. I needed to head back. I turned around to retrace my steps, following the small pieces of flagging tape I'd tied to branches to mark my route. Standard practice. I always mark my trail in unfamiliar forest. The first piece of flagging tape I came to was torn. Shredded, actually, hanging in strips like something had clawed at it. That was strange, but not alarming. Could have been a monkey, a bird. I kept walking, looking for the next marker. It was gone. I'd tied markers every 30 meters. The next one should have been right there. But the tree I'd tied it to was bare, the branch smooth, no sign that anything had ever been attached to it. I felt the first flutter of real concern. I pulled out my GPS. The screen showed my position, but when I tried to pull up my tracked route, the digital breadcrumb trail the device automatically records, there was nothing. The track log was empty, as if I'd never entered the forest at all. I tried my satellite phone. No signal. That made no sense. Satellite phones work anywhere with a view of the sky, and I could see patches of sky through the canopy. The light was fading faster than it should. The golden glow was turning orange, then amber, the shadows growing long and thick. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Not animal footsteps. Human footsteps. Walking through the forest behind me, matching my pace exactly. When I stopped, they stopped. When I moved, they moved. I spun around. Hello? Is someone there? Nothing. Just trees and shadows and silence. I started walking faster, trying to navigate by the sun's position, heading west toward where the village should be. The footsteps followed, always just out of sight, always the same distance behind me. Then I heard my own voice. Hello? Is someone there? My exact words, my exact intonation, coming from somewhere ahead of me now. A perfect mimicry. My heart was pounding. I've heard about lyrebirds in Australia that can mimic human voices, but there's nothing like that in West Africa. And this wasn't bird-like. It was exact. Digital recording exact. The forest was changing around me. I know that sounds insane, but I swear it's true. The trees were in different positions. That massive silk cotton tree with the distinctive hollow in its trunk. I'd photographed it earlier on my right side. Now it was on my left, but I'd been walking in a straight line. The path beneath my feet was different too. Earlier, it had been relatively clear, a game trail. Now it was overgrown, choked with vegetation, like no one had walked here in years. I checked my compass. The needle was spinning slowly, continuously, never settling on a direction. This isn't possible, I muttered to myself. This isn't possible. The forest echoed back, but the voice came from above me, from the canopy. I looked up and my blood turned to ice. There were shapes in the trees. Human-shaped, but wrong. They clung to branches 30 feet up, motionless, watching me. I couldn't make out details in the failing light, but I could see the silhouettes. 5, 6, maybe more. Too thin, limbs too long, heads tilted at angles that made my neck hurt to look at. One of them moved. A jerky, insect-like motion, repositioning on the branch without any apparent effort, defying gravity. "Leave before the sun touches the trees from the side," it said in the chief's voice. Perfect mimicry. Then it laughed, but the laugh was wrong. Too many voices layered together, high and low simultaneously. I ran, crashing through undergrowth, branches whipping my face, camera equipment banging against my back. I didn't care about staying quiet or protecting my gear. I just ran, choosing directions at random, looking for any sign of the forest edge, the village, anything human. The things in the trees followed. I could hear them moving through the canopy above me. That same jerky, impossible movement. Branches creaking and snapping. And always, the mimicry. My wife's voice. "Malik, where are you?" My daughter's voice. "Daddy, I'm scared." My own voice. "Help me. Please, somebody help me." All coming from different directions, overlapping, echoing. I burst into a clearing and stopped so suddenly I almost fell. It was a perfect circle, maybe 20 meters across, the ground bare earth, no vegetation growing at all. In the center was a tree unlike any I'd ever seen. Its bark was almost black, and it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The branches twisted in ways that hurt to look at, configurations that seemed geometrically impossible. And hanging from the branches were things. Backpacks, clothing, a camera, expensive, professional, like mine, a machete, a child's shoe, all of them old, weathered, some falling apart with age and moisture. This was a trophy tree. I understood that immediately, instinctively. Every item represented someone who'd been caught by this forest. The shapes in the trees had stopped following. They ringed the clearing, watching from the shadows, perfectly still now. One of them spoke, and this time it wasn't mimicry. The voice was layered, ancient, speaking Fawn, a language I don't speak but somehow understood in that moment. The forest remembers every footstep, every broken branch, every tree cut, every animal killed, every promise broken. We are the memory. We are the price. Another voice, different but equally layered. You were warned. The boundary was clear. But you, like all the others, thought you knew better. Thought the rules didn't apply to you. I wanted to argue, to explain that I'd meant no disrespect, that I was just doing my job. But my voice wouldn't work. My throat was closed with terror. The first voice spoke again. The forest is hungry. It has been patient. You will feed it, or you will serve it. Choose. One of the shapes dropped from a tree, landing in the clearing with a sound like meat hitting stone. It stood, if you could call it standing, on legs that bent wrong, too many joints. It was roughly human-sized, but the proportions were nightmarish. The head was almost featureless, just smooth bark-like skin with two dark hollows where eyes should be. It started walking toward me. Slow, deliberate steps. Choose, it repeated in my daughter's voice. I don't know what made me remember the shrine, the one at the forest entrance with the offerings. But suddenly I understood, this wasn't just a forest. It was a contract. The villagers made offerings, showed respect, acknowledged the forest's sovereignty. In return, they were allowed to live beside it. I'd entered without offering anything, without asking permission. I'd walked in like I owned it, like it was just another assignment. With shaking hands, I pulled my camera from my bag, my most valuable possession, the tool of my trade, worth more than most people in the village made in a year. I held it out. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice cracking. I didn't understand. "Please, I have a family, a daughter. Please." The thing stopped walking, tilted its head. "An offering? Now, when you're already ours." "Please," I whispered. I didn't know. I didn't respect. "But I'm offering now. Everything I have. Take it. Just let me leave." The silence stretched out. The shapes in the trees were motionless. The light was almost gone now, the clearing in deep twilight. Then, impossibly, I heard a different voice. An old woman's voice, speaking Fawn in a tone that was almost amused. "He offers what he values most. Perhaps he can be taught." The thing in front of me stepped back. One step, then another. "Go," it said in its layered voice. "But leave everything. Camera, bag, phone, watch. Everything. You leave with only what you wore, nothing more. And you do not return. Ever. This forest is closed to you." I didn't hesitate. I dropped my camera on the ground, stripped off my bag, my watch, pulled my satellite phone from my pocket and dropped it. I stood there in just my clothes and boots. "Go," the voice repeated. "Before we change our minds." I walked backward out of the clearing, not daring to turn around. The shapes in the trees parted, creating a path. I followed it, still walking backward, watching them watch me. After maybe 50 meters, I finally turned and ran. The forest seemed to release me. That's the only way I can describe it. Suddenly the trees thinned. I could see lights ahead, the village, and I was stumbling out onto the road, gasping, my clothes torn, my face bleeding from branches. The village chief was waiting at the forest edge, a small group of villagers behind him. He looked at me, saw my empty hands, my terror, and nodded slowly. "You were warned," he said quietly. "But you survived. That is rare. What did it cost?" "Everything," I whispered. He nodded again. "Then you were lucky. Usually, it costs your life." They took me to the chief's compound, gave me water, let me sit by a fire even though the night was warm. I was shaking uncontrollably, my teeth chattering like I had fever. One of the elder women made me drink something bitter, herbs, she said, to help with shock. I tried to explain what happened. The words came out jumbled, incoherent. The chief listened patiently, not interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Cass Forest is old," he finally said. "Older than our village. Older than our people's memory. It existed before the kingdoms, before the slave trade, before the colonizers. It has always been there, and it has always had rules." "But what were those things?" I asked. "What did I see?" He shook his head. "We don't have a name for them in French or English. In Fawn, we call them the Aziza, but that's not quite right either. They're not spirits exactly, not gods. They're the forest's immune system. Its guardians. Its memory. Memory. Every tree that's cut without permission, they remember. Every animal killed for sport, not food, they remember. Every person who enters with disrespect, with arrogance, they remember. And they collect the debt." I thought about the trophy tree, all those items hanging from its branches. How many people has that forest taken? The chief's face grew sad. "Over the years? Many. Sometimes villagers who broke taboos. Sometimes outsiders who didn't listen to warnings. Sometimes children who wandered too far during games." He paused. "But the forest gives back too. It provides medicine plants, clean water, game animals. but only to those who respect the contract. What contract? The one our ancestors made generations ago. We protect the forest from loggers, from developers, from those who would destroy it. In return, it protects us. It provides for us. But the forest must remain sovereign. It must remain feared. That fear keeps it safe. I stayed in the village that night. Couldn't bring myself to leave. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those shapes in the trees, heard my daughter's voice coming from that impossible throat. The next morning, the chief walked me to the main road where I could catch a taxi. Before I left, he gave me something, a small carved wooden token on a string. "Wear this," he said. "It marks you as someone who learned, someone who paid. The forest will remember you. If you ever come near another sacred forest, anywhere in Benin, Togo, Ghana, this will protect you. But only if you respect the boundaries." I wear it now. Every day. I've never taken it off. I left Benin that afternoon. Flew back to my home in Dakar. My wife saw my face and knew immediately that something fundamental had changed. I told her I'd had an accident, lost my equipment, needed time to recover. It took me 3 weeks before I could tell her the truth. She listened without judgment. She's from a rural family, grew up with stories of sacred groves and forest spirits. She believed me immediately. "Will you go back?" she asked. "To photography? To the forests?" I didn't know how to answer. I haven't worked since. I have the footage and photos from before I entered Cass Forest. Hundreds of beautiful images sitting on hard drives, ready to be edited and sold. But every time I try to look at them, I see those shapes in the trees. I hear those layered voices. My agent calls every few days. Magazine editors email. There are assignments waiting, contracts to fulfill, opportunities I'm missing. My savings are running out. But I can't do it. I can't go back into the forest. Any forest. Because I understand now what I didn't before. We are guests in those spaces. We exist on sufferance. The wild places of this world, the truly wild places, they don't belong to us. They never did. We've just convinced ourselves they do. In West Africa, there are still forests that have never been mapped, never been studied, never been photographed. And there's a reason for that. Those forests have guardians. They have rules. They have memory. The environmental organizations, the conservation groups, they talk about protecting the forest from us. But they don't understand the truth. In some places, the forest protects itself. It doesn't need us. It tolerates us, sometimes, if we show proper respect. But push too far, ignore the warnings, walk in with arrogance and assumption, and the forest will teach you. If you're lucky, like I was, you'll survive the lesson. If you're not lucky, you become another item hanging from the trophy tree. Another memory. Another debt collected. My daughter asked me last week why I don't take pictures anymore. She's 8 years old, proud of her father's work, used to showing her friends my photographs in magazines. I told her I'm learning to see without a camera, learning to experience without capturing, learning that some things aren't meant to be possessed, documented, or owned, only respected. She didn't understand. Maybe she will one day. I still have dreams about Cass Forest. In them, I'm walking through that clearing again, approaching the trophy tree. My camera is hanging there among the other items, slowly rotting, being absorbed back into the forest. And the shapes in the trees are watching, patient and eternal, waiting for the next person who thinks they know better. Sometimes I wake up and find dirt under my fingernails, even though I haven't been outside. Sometimes I smell that sweet incense smell, just for a moment, before it fades. The forest remembers me. The chief said it would. And I remember it. Every moment, every terror, every impossible thing I witnessed. I'm alive. I have my family. I have my life. But I left part of myself in that forest. And I don't think I'm ever getting it back. Malik no longer works as a wildlife photographer. He hasn't entered a forest, sacred or otherwise, in 3 months. The token the chief gave him hangs around his neck, a constant reminder of boundaries he will never cross again. In Benin, Cass Forest remains protected, feared, and sovereign. The villagers continue their offerings, maintain their contract, teach their children the rules. And the forest, in its ancient patience, continues to stand. Malik's story reminds us that nature isn't just biology and ecosystems. In some places, it's consciousness, it's memory, it's power that predates human understanding and will outlast human existence. The sacred forests of West Africa have survived centuries of colonization, deforestation, and development not just because of human protection, but because of their own power to defend themselves. The old ways persist not because people are ignorant, but because people remember. They remember what happens when you forget respect, when you forget fear, when you treat the ancient wild places as territory to be conquered rather than powers to be acknowledged. Malik remembered, and he survived, but he will never be the same. Story 5. The Woman Who Wasn't My Daughter. My name is Adebayo. I'm 54 years old, and I work as a school teacher in Ibadan, Nigeria. I teach mathematics to secondary school students, have done for the past 28 years. I'm a widower. My wife died 6 years ago from cancer, leaving me to raise our only child, our daughter Funmi, alone. Funmi is 19 now. Smart, beautiful, studying pharmacy at the university. She's everything to me, my whole world. Or at least, she was. I'm an educated man. I have a bachelor's degree, a teaching certificate. I believe in reason, in logic, in what can be proven and measured. When my elderly mother talks about Abiku, spirit children who die and are reborn repeatedly to torment their parents, I smile and nod. When neighbors whisper about changelings, about things that steal children and replace them with copies, I dismiss it as folklore. Or I did, until 3 weeks ago. Until I realized that the young woman living in my house, eating my food, calling me daddy, wasn't my daughter. It started small. Little things I almost didn't notice. Funmi came home from university for the long break about a month ago. I was happy to have her back. The house feels empty when she's away at school. She arrived on a Friday evening, her usual bright self, hugging me at the door, asking what I'd cooked for dinner. Everything seemed normal that first night. We ate together, talked about her exams, her friends, her plans for the break. She went to bed around 10, like always. But the next morning, I noticed something odd. Funmi has been allergic to eggs her entire life. Not severely, no anaphylaxis, but they make her sick. Stomach cramps, vomiting. She's avoided them religiously since she was a child. I've never kept eggs in the house because of this. That Saturday morning, I made yam and vegetable sauce for breakfast. Funmi came to the kitchen, looked at the food, and frowned. No eggs, Daddy? I stared at her. You can't eat eggs. You're allergic. She laughed. What? No, I'm not. I love eggs. Don't you remember? I always ask you to make egg sauce. My blood went cold. Funmi, you've been allergic to eggs since you were 3 years old. She looked at me strangely. Are you feeling okay, Daddy? You're thinking of someone else. I tried to convince myself I was mistaken. Maybe her allergy had changed. Maybe she'd outgrown it. But the certainty of her tone, the way she looked at me like I was confused, it unsettled me. I let it go. Made eggs. She ate them with no problem. Over the next few days, more things emerged. Small discrepancies that individually could be explained away, but together formed a pattern that made my skin crawl. Her handwriting was different. Funmi has always had beautiful handwriting. Neat, rounded letters, very distinctive. I'm a teacher, I noticed these things. But when I saw her writing a shopping list, the handwriting was angular, cramped, completely different. When I mentioned it, she looked at me blankly. My handwriting has always been like this, Daddy. Her laughter was wrong. Funmi has this bright, musical laugh that sounds like her mother's. It's one of my favorite sounds in the world. But this girl's laugh was different, lower, harsher. It set my teeth on edge. She didn't remember things. Important things. One evening, I mentioned her 10th birthday party, the one where she'd insisted on having it at the beach, where a wave had knocked her over and she'd been terrified of the ocean ever since. It was a core memory, something we'd joked about for years. She looked at me with polite confusion. I don't remember that, Daddy. Are you sure that happened? Of course I'm sure. You cried for an hour. You made me promise we'd never go to the beach again. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Maybe you're thinking of a dream you had, or another child. That's when I started to truly panic. These weren't small details. These were fundamental pieces of who my daughter was. I called her best friend, Blessing, using the excuse that I wanted to arrange a surprise for Funmi. I asked casual questions. Do you remember when Funmi did this? What was that thing Funmi always said? Blessing's answers matched my memories perfectly, but when I later mentioned these same things to the girl in my house, she looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. I started testing her. Subtly at first, I asked about her favorite food. Funmi has always loved pounded yam with a goosey soup, but this girl said jollof rice with chicken. When I made pounded yam, her supposed favorite, she ate it politely but without enthusiasm. I asked about the scar on her knee, the one she got falling off her bicycle when she was 7. She looked down at her knee, at the very visible scar, and said, "Oh, this? I got this last year. Tripped on campus." No, the scar was from when she was 7. I was there. I took her to the hospital. I held her hand while they stitched it. But this girl was telling me a different story with such conviction, such certainty, that for a moment I questioned my own memory. One night, I couldn't sleep. I went to her room around 2 a.m. just to check on her like I used to when she was small. The door was slightly open. She was standing at the window, completely still, staring out at the darkness. Not looking at anything in particular, just staring. For someone who was supposed to be asleep, she was fully alert, unnaturally still. I watched her for 5 minutes. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, silhouetted against the window, her breathing so slow and shallow I could barely detect it. "Funmi," I whispered. She turned her head, too fast, too smooth, like it was on a swivel. Her eyes caught the light from the hallway, and for just a second, they reflected like an animal's eyes, green and bright. "Yes, Daddy." Her voice was normal, pleasant. "Do you need something? What are you doing awake?" "Just looking at the moon. It's beautiful tonight." I looked past her. There was no moon. The sky was completely overcast. I went to see a Babalawo the next day. A traditional priest, someone I'd never consulted in my life, someone I'd always privately considered a charlatan. But I was desperate. His compound was on the outskirts of Ibadan, a modest house with a shrine in the courtyard. He was an old man, maybe 70, with kind eyes and hands gnarled from age. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding, his expression growing more serious as I spoke. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Did your daughter have any encounters recently?" he finally asked. "Before she came home? Any accidents? Any strange experiences?" I thought about it. She mentioned, about 2 months ago, she said she'd gotten lost coming back from a night class. Ended up in a part of campus she didn't recognize. She joked about it, said she must have been more tired than she thought. The Babalawo's expression darkened. "What time was this?" She didn't say exactly. "Late though?" "After 10. He stood up, went to his shrine, and began arranging cowrie shells in a pattern I didn't recognize. He cast them 3 times, studying the results each time. His face grew graver with each throw. "Your daughter," he said quietly, "encountered something that night. Something old, and it followed her home." "What do you mean?" "There are entities. We call them various names, Abiku, Emery, spirits of crossroads, that exist between worlds. They're drawn to certain people, certain energies. Young women especially. Women in transition, between girlhood and womanhood." He paused. "Your daughter walked through a threshold that night, a crossing point, and something saw her. But the girl in my house is not your daughter," he finished. "Your daughter is still alive, but she's elsewhere, displaced. And this thing is wearing her form, living her life, learning to be her." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table. Where is she? Where is my real daughter? In the in-between. The space between here and there. Conscious but trapped. Time moves differently there. For her, it may feel like days, weeks. For you, it's been 3 weeks, I whispered. He nodded. The longer the replacement stays, the more it learns, the more it becomes her. Eventually, the real fun-me will fade completely, and this thing will be permanent. It will have successfully stolen a life. How do I get her back? The Babalawo looked at me with deep sympathy. You have to make the replacement reveal itself. Force it to drop the mask. They can mimic many things, but there are certain truths they cannot fake. Certain bonds they cannot replicate. What bonds? Blood, memory, love. He reached into a pouch and pulled out a small bottle of black liquid. This is prepared with specific herbs. You put 3 drops in her food. It won't harm your daughter if it's truly her. But if it's the replacement, it will cause a reaction. The mask will slip. I took the bottle with shaking hands. And then what? When the mask slips, then you confront it. You demand the return of your daughter. You make an exchange, something of equal value. These entities understand transactions, bargains. They respect certain rules. What could I possibly offer that's equal to my daughter? He looked at me steadily. That, Mr. Adebayo, is something only you can answer. I went home with the bottle in my pocket, feeling like I was in a nightmare. Part of me still wanted to believe this was all madness, that I was having some kind of breakdown from grief and loneliness. But I knew, deep in my gut, in that place where a parent knows their child, I knew. That girl in my house wasn't fun-me. I made dinner that evening, jollof rice, since that's what she'd said she liked. I prepared it carefully, normally. When it was ready, I portioned it onto plates. While her back was turned, I added 3 drops of the black liquid to her portion. It had no smell, no color change. It simply vanished into the rice. We sat down to eat. I watched her take the first bite. Chew. Swallow. Nothing happened. She took another bite. Still nothing. I was beginning to think the Babalawo had been wrong, that I'd wasted my time, that I was losing my mind. She dropped her fork. Her hand was shaking. She stared at it like it belonged to someone else. Daddy. Her voice was different. Higher. Frightened. Daddy, something's wrong. Her skin began to ripple, like water disturbed by wind. The surface of her face seemed to shift and move. What did you do? This voice was deeper, layered, not human. What did you give me? I stood up, my chair scraping back. Where is my daughter? What have you done with Funmi? The thing, I couldn't think of it as her anymore, stood as well. Its face was struggling to maintain Funmi's features, but they kept slipping, revealing glimpses of something else underneath. Something with too smooth skin, too large eyes. She's safe, it hissed. She's sleeping, dreaming. She doesn't even know she's gone. Bring her back. Why? It tilted its head at that wrong angle. I'm better than her. Smarter. I don't cry. I don't complain. I'm the perfect daughter. You should be grateful. You're not her. You'll never be her. Its face finally gave up trying to hold Funmi's form. What emerged was humanoid but wrong. Features too symmetrical, skin too pale, eyes too large and entirely black. It was wearing Funmi's clothes, had Funmi's body shape, but the face was alien. She's weak, it said. So much fear, so much doubt. I've been watching her for months, learning her. I can be her better than she can. No, my voice was shaking but firm. You can mimic her habits, her mannerisms, but you can't be her, because you don't know what it's like to be human, to be vulnerable, to be imperfect. That's what makes her real. That's what makes her my daughter. The thing laughed, but there was uncertainty in it now. And what will you give for her return? These transactions require balance. What are you willing to trade? I thought about this all day. What was equal to my daughter's life? Take me, I said. Let her go, and take me instead. I'm older. I've lived my life. She has her whole future ahead of her. The thing studied me with those black eyes. For a long moment, it said nothing. An interesting offer, it said, moving closer. Its movements were fluid now, no longer trying to mimic human motion. A father's life for a daughter's. the bond of blood, the weight of sacrifice. It circled me slowly. But you misunderstand the nature of the exchange. What do you mean? I don't want your life, old man. Life is cheap. Life ends. What I want is what you offered before you even knew it. Those black eyes fixed on me. Your grief. I felt my stomach drop. My grief. 6 years ago, your wife died. You held her hand in the hospital. You watched her waste away. You felt the world crack in half when she took her last breath. Its voice was almost gentle now, terrifyingly so. That grief, deep, pure, transformative grief, is what opened the door. Your daughter was vulnerable because she carries it too. She soaked in it. It makes her accessible. I don't understand. Grief is a threshold, Mr. Adebayo. It tears holes between worlds. Your grief called to us. Your daughter's grief made her visible to us. And grief, true grief, is what I really want. It smiled, and the expression was wrong on that alien face. I will return your daughter. But in exchange, you must give up your grief. All of it. Every memory of your wife. Every moment of loss. Every tear shed. You will remember that she existed, but you won't remember loving her. Won't remember missing her. The grief will be extracted. I staggered backward. No, that's the price. It interrupted. Your grief is what sustains me. It's what drew me here. Pure, parental grief is rare. Precious. It's worth 1,000 ordinary lives. It moved closer. Give me your grief, and your daughter walks free. Refuse, and I keep her. Eventually, she'll fade completely, and I'll become her permanently. Those are your choices. I thought about my wife, about the way she smiled, the sound of her voice, the feeling of her hand in mine. The grief of losing her had been unbearable, yes, but it was also the proof that I'd loved her, that she'd mattered, that what we had was real. If I gave that up, what would be left? But then I thought about Funmi, trapped somewhere between worlds, alone, frightened. My baby girl, the life my wife and I had created together. What would my wife want me to do? I already knew the answer. How do I know you'll keep your word? I asked. How do I know you'll really release her? The thing drew itself up. We have rules. We don't lie in transactions. We can't. It's part of what we are. If I say I'll release her in exchange for your grief, it will happen. I closed my eyes, saw my wife's face one last time in my mind, felt the weight of 6 years of missing her. Take it, I whispered. Take the grief. Just bring my daughter back. The thing moved fast, faster than I could track. Its hand shot out and pressed against my chest, directly over my heart. The touch burned cold, so cold I gasped. This will hurt, it said, almost apologetically. It pulled. I can't describe the sensation adequately. It was like something was being ripped out of my chest, torn away from every cell in my body. I felt it in my bones, in my blood, in my brain. Memories flickered past. My wife's funeral, the hospital room, the diagnosis, every tear I'd shed in 6 years. And as they flickered, they changed. The emotional weight lifted from them. The pain drained away. I could see the memories, but I couldn't feel them anymore. They became flat, distant, like watching a movie about someone else's life. I fell to my knees. The thing was glowing now, its form becoming more solid, more real. It was feeding on what it had taken from me, growing stronger. Thank you, it said, and its voice was thick with satisfaction. This will sustain me for years. Then it reached out again and made a tearing motion in the air, like opening a curtain. Reality split. Through the gap, I could see another place, a gray, misty void where nothing had substance. And floating in that void, unconscious, was Funmi, my real Funmi. I could tell instantly, everything about her was right. Her face, her posture, the way her hair fell across her shoulders. The thing reached through the gap and pulled her out. She materialized on my living room floor, solid and real, breathing but unconscious. The exchange is complete, the thing said. It was already fading, becoming translucent. She'll wake in a few minutes with no memory of where she's been. She'll think she just fell asleep. As for you, It smiled one last time. Try not to regret your choice, Mr. Adebayo. Grief is heavy, but it's also human. Without it, you may find you've lost more than you realized. Then it was gone. I knelt beside Funmi, touching her face with shaking hands. She was warm, breathing steadily. She was real. She was back. But when I tried to feel relief, tried to feel joy, there was something hollow in my chest. Something missing. Funmi woke up about 10 minutes later, confused and disoriented. She had no memory of the past 3 weeks. As far as she knew, she'd just arrived home from university yesterday. When I tried to tell her what happened, she thought I was joking. "Daddy, you're scaring me. Are you okay? Should I call someone?" I stopped trying to explain. What was the point? The next few days were strange. Funmi settled back into the house, back into her normal routines. She ate breakfast, helped with chores, told me about her university courses. Everything was right. Everything was as it should be. But I felt nothing. Oh, I was functionally present. I cooked for her, asked about her day, smiled when she laughed. But there was a distance, a numbness I couldn't shake. I found my wife's photograph one evening, the one I used to keep by my bedside, the one I'd talk to sometimes when I was lonely. I picked it up and looked at her face. I remembered her, yes. I could recall facts about our marriage, about our life together. But the feeling was gone. The ache of missing her had vanished completely. I waited to feel sad about that, waited to feel loss. Nothing came. That's when I understood what I'd really given up. It wasn't just grief, it was the capacity to grieve, the ability to feel that particular depth of emotion. I'd traded it away, and now there was a hole in me that would never fill. Funmi noticed the change about a week later. "Daddy, you seem different," she said one evening. "Distant. Is everything okay?" "I'm fine," I said automatically. "You don't seem fine. You seem, I don't know, disconnected." She touched my hand. "Talk to me." I wanted to. I wanted to tell her everything, about the thing that took her place, about the exchange, about what I'd sacrificed to get her back. But I couldn't find the words. And more than that, I couldn't find the emotion to make the words matter. "I'm just tired," I said. That's all. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But she didn't push. That was 3 weeks ago. Funmi is still home from university, still trying to understand why her father has become this hollow version of himself. She asks me every few days if I'm okay, if something's wrong. I tell her I'm fine. I go to work. I teach my classes. I grade papers. I come home, cook dinner, watch television. Everything functions normally. But I'm not the same person I was. The Babalawo warned me, in his way. He said these entities understand transactions, that they respect rules. But he didn't tell me that some prices are paid in installments, over time, in ways you don't fully understand until it's too late. I have my daughter back. She's safe, whole, herself again. That's what matters. That's what I tell myself every morning when I wake up and feel that hollowness in my chest. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder, who really won that exchange? I saved Funmi's life, yes. But the father she has now, this emotionally distant, hollowed-out version, is that really better than being gone? Am I still me? Or am I just another kind of replacement? One that looks right, acts right, but is fundamentally missing something essential? I don't have answers to these questions. What I do know is this: my daughter is safe. She's here, in my house, living her life, planning her future. When she graduates, gets married, has children of her own, I'll be there, physically present for all of it. But will I feel it? Will I be able to access that deep parental joy, that fierce protective love? I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to find out. The thing said grief is a threshold, but it didn't tell me that the absence of grief is its own kind of threshold. A doorway to a different kind of in-between, where you exist but don't fully live, where you function but don't fully feel. I'm still here, still teaching, still being a father. But part of me, the part that made me fully human, is somewhere else now, feeding something ancient and hungry, sustaining it for years to come. And I can't even grieve the loss. Mr. Adebayo still teaches mathematics at his secondary school in Ibadan. Funmi returned to university 2 weeks ago, reluctantly leaving her father, worried about the change she sees in him but unable to understand its source. He goes through the motions of life with perfect competence, but those who know him well notice the difference. A colleague mentioned recently that he seems peaceful but hollow, like the lights are on but something's missing inside. She had no idea how accurate that observation was. His story is perhaps the cruelest of tonight's accounts, not because of violence or terror, but because of the bargain, the choice between losing a daughter and losing oneself. In traditional Yoruba belief, the Abiku and similar entities exist at the intersection of love and loss, feeding on the emotions that make us most human while offering exchanges that seem merciful but carry impossible costs. Mr. Adebayo saved his daughter, but the man who saved her is not the same man who raised her. The grief he sacrificed wasn't just pain. It was proof of love, evidence of connection, the weight that gives meaning to loss and joy alike. Without it, he exists in a perpetual present, unable to access the depths that make life rich and full. He has his daughter back, but he's lost the capacity to fully appreciate what that means. Some might say he made the right choice. A daughter's life for a father's emotional depth. The mathematics seem clear, but Mr. Adebayo teaches mathematics. He knows that some equations only reveal their true cost over time, and some prices are paid not in what you lose immediately, but in what you lose the ability to feel forever. 5 stories, 5 witnesses, 5 reminders that in West Africa, the boundary between the seen and unseen world has never been as solid as modern skepticism might suggest. Kayamika, who learned that prosperity always has a price, and some debts compound across dimensions. Dr. Femi, who discovered that some ecosystems predate our understanding and don't particularly care to be studied. Sister Alma, who inherited a family obligation and now serves as a bridge between worlds every new moon. Malik, who entered a sacred forest without permission and learned that some places defend themselves. And Mr. Adebayo, who sacrificed his capacity to grieve to save his daughter, and now lives in the hollow space where deep emotion used to dwell. These are not morality tales with simple lessons. They're accounts of encounters with forces that operate by rules older than our civilizations, forces that don't conform to our expectations of how the world should work. In each case, the witness survived, but survival came at a cost, psychological, spiritual, or both. Because that's the truth about these encounters. They mark you. They change fundamental assumptions about reality. They leave you different than you were before. If there's a common thread in tonight's stories, it's this: respect for boundaries. Cultural boundaries, spiritual boundaries, natural boundaries. The witnesses who ignored warnings, who pushed past limits, who treated sacred spaces as territories to be conquered. They paid prices they never anticipated. The old ways persist in West Africa not because people are backward or superstitious, but because people remember. They remember what happens when you forget respect, when you forget fear, when you forget that you share this world with forces that were here long before you and will remain long after you're gone. Modern education, scientific thinking, urban living, none of these make you immune. Kayamika had a university degree. Dr. Femi was a scientist. Sister Alma was a trained nurse. Malik was an award-winning photographer. Mr. Adebayo was a respected teacher. Knowledge didn't protect them. Skepticism didn't shield them. What might have protected them was something simpler: humility. The willingness to acknowledge that the universe is larger and stranger than our models can fully capture. The wisdom to respect boundaries even when you don't fully understand them. In the end, each of our witnesses learned the same lesson, though they learned it in different ways. There are powers in this world that don't require your belief to exist. They simply are. And whether you acknowledge them or ignore them, they will make themselves known when you cross their thresholds. We hope tonight's stories have been illuminating, perhaps even cautionary. If you have your own stories, experiences that defied explanation, encounters that changed your understanding of what's possible, share them in the comments. We read every one, and who knows, your story might be featured in a future episode. Thank you for listening to Nightbound Bloodline. Sleep well.